Greetings, PlayStation adepts. In this video, I'll talk about the 90 best games in PS Plus Extra and Deluxe subscriptions. I might be able to find a couple of interesting projects for you. Actually, there will be even more than 90 games, as some of them have several parts. For your convenience, they are sorted alphabetically and have time codes in the description. And you, in your turn, write in the comments those projects from the catalog that you liked and that I missed, but in your opinion are also very cool and worth playing. Well, pour yourself a cup of deliciousness, make yourself comfortable, and prepare your console to add your favorite games to your library at once. Have fun. Anno 1800. Strategies are a rare guest on consoles. Yes, their peak of popularity they have already passed, but before this did not play in this genre, it is worth at least trying. Strategy is divided into several subspecies, and Anno is a city-building and economic simulator in real time, the action of which unfolds in the early 19th century. Players will be able to choose their path to victory, economic relations, peaceful resolution of conflict situations, or military action. Assassin's Creed. The Assassin's Creed series has come a long way from a real breakthrough in the stealth action genre to stagnation and degradation, and then rebirth with a bias towards action. The catalog contains almost every installment in the series except for the first and last, but I like the Ezio collection best, where the game still works in the old scheme, and Odyssey, which personally showed me that the series can still be interesting and fun. I just wish they'd make the open world smaller and the games themselves shorter. Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5. These are first-person shooters dedicated to World War I and World War II. The main emphasis is on online battles, but there is also a story campaign, which is a small war stories based on real historical events. Back 4 Blood. Old people remember a great shooter where you need to kill crowds of zombies called Left 4 Dead and Back 4 Blood in general repeats the formula of that game, but with somewhat lower dynamics, weapon pumping and maps, which replace the branches of pumping. I can't say that the game is a masterpiece, but it's definitely interesting to run once through the story campaign with friends in co-op. Bloodborne. Many PlayStation adherents started their acquaintance with Souls-like games with this game. Mystical, enigmatic, and given out in bits and pieces, plot, Victorian style, hardcore gameplay, all this made you fall in love with the world of Bloodborne and spend a lot of time there, suffering from pain in all hard-to-reach places and enjoying overcoming the next boss. Call of Cthulhu. This game should appeal to fans of mysticism and detective stories. It has interesting ways to investigate what is going on, which are based on pumping the abilities of the main character and independently compiling the overall picture of what is going on with skimpy clues. And the most interesting thing I think here is that the player has the right to be rational and look at all the events in the game through the bottom of the glass, or to go all out and plunge the protagonist into the abyss of madness and mystification. Chernobylite. The toy attracts attention by the fact that the events take place in Chernobyl, where the protagonist returns to figure out why he, in the dreams of the beginning, is a fiancé who disappeared there. The plot of the game is exciting from the first minute, and sincerely want to know what is going on there. What are the green crystals around? And who is the Black Stalker? But from the gameplay point of view, the game is ambiguous. In fact, we are forced to vacuum all locations and collect junk to equip our base, and we have to do it again and again on the same few levels. Artificial intelligence is dull, and shootouts are not so much, but nevertheless, the game sucks you in and you want to pass it to the end. Child of Light. The first thing that catches your eye is the visual style of the game. Everything looks like painted with watercolors, and it is drawn very talented, which gives this fairy tale game a lion's dose of atmosphere. The combat system here is turn-based, like in a JRPG, but the battles are not very complex and therefore you should not be afraid of them. Chivalry 2. This is a multiplayer action game set in a medieval setting, where two armies of up to 32 players on each side face off on the battlefield. At the beginning of the match, the player chooses the class of warrior. He will fight archer, vanguard, infantryman, or knight. Each class has 3 subclasses. One of them is available immediately, and the rest are opened after pumping. The very mechanics of battles at first glance may seem simple, but in fact, there are a lot of nuances, such as left or right blows, deceptive feints, rebounds, defense penetration, kicks, etc. So to learn to fight really well and understand all the nuances will require more than 1 hour of practice. But even without thorough training, you can break into the thick of battle and cut down a couple of heads, spattering the ground with blood. Control. The game from the studio that developed such masterpieces as Max Payne and Alan Wake, I simply couldn't miss. And that's why I even made a pre-order. At the first playthrough, it seemed to me some too murky, and I played it on PC, and there my fingers were tangled because of not the most convenient control. But when I played it on PlayStation, I got one and the same pleasure. And from the realized destructibility, and from the mystery which imbued the project. Crusader Kings 3. This is another representative of strategy and subscription, which is very different from Anno. It is a so-called global strategy in real time, where the player manages a royal dynasty for 5 centuries, captures new territories with the help of diplomacy and political marriages, as well as fights with other states for resources and territory. In such a strategy, you can go in the evening and leave only in the morning. So they are very much addictive. Crysis Remastered. The events of Crysis unfold on the Linchin Islands in the Philippine Sea, where sharp temperature anomalies are recorded, and the inhabitants of the island now and then see unidentified flying objects in the sky. To deal with the situation, the US government sends there a special unit, Predator, under the command of Major Barnes with the call sign Prophet. The members of this unit are dressed in a high-tech nanosuit, which can change its properties to better suit the task at hand. Cult of the Lamb. I became acquainted with this sectarian settlement simulator thanks to my subscriber Happy Milkman, who gave me the game in order to stream on it. I really enjoyed progressing through the game, and every time a new building became available to me, I ran to erect it and see what I could do there. The game doesn't look very serious, but the attention to detail and possibilities is very great. Here, you can sacrifice your novices to strengthen the faith of the others, or even use his meat for sustenance. At the same time, no one prevents you from resurrecting your most ardent and favorite sectarian if he died of old age, and there's a lot of that in Cult of the Lamb. The only thing is that the part of gameplay connected with dungeon races is not very diverse, but these races are quite short, and so they don't manage to get boring. Dark Pictures Anthology. Interactive cinema is the link between movies and games, and it's a link I loved right off the bat. The Dark Pictures Anthology series offers to play horror games whose plot deceives the player and hides what's really going on, which is what makes it so appealing. In Man of Medan, I highly recommend to play in co-op. Without it, the game will not give full pleasure, but Little Hope and House of Ashes in single player are quite capable to please and surprise. As for The Devil in Me, this is the most controversial and weakest part of the series, in my opinion, but it's still great that it's available in subscription and you can play it. Dave the Diver. Subscription Extra is sometimes happy to have new games on release day. It happens rarely and most often with small indie projects, but small doesn't mean bad, and Dave the Diver is just one of those games. Everything is quite simple. We control a fat little man who goes to the depths to get outlandish fish for the sushi restaurant. Then comes the evening, and together with it, visitors come to the restaurant to taste unusual dishes. And so, from day to day, but the constant progress and development of equipment, new mechanics, and funny plot do not let you get bored, even from such, at first glance, monotonous routine. Days Gone. I remember how at one of the E3 presentations they showed how a poor biker was being chased by an unrealistic crowd of aggressive zombies, and at that moment, it was enough to sell me the game. In general, the project turned out to be good, but only the constant need to go back to do quests, not very big bestiary, empty world, and not scary hordes at the end of the game, but it takes its atmosphere, led a simple but cute story about love and friendship, and also, the best in my opinion, the realization of the motorcycle, which is just unreal cool to wheel around the game locations. It's a pity that we probably won't see the sequel. Dead Cells. If I remember correctly, this is the first roguelike in my life. The essence of the game is that after each death, you have to start from the beginning, but the location map will be slightly changed, as well as the weapons that get in the way. Coupled with the Metroidvania mechanics and interesting bosses, making new runs in Dead Cells doesn't get boring for very long. Dead Island 2. The events unfold in Los Angeles, whose inhabitants have also been infected by the zombie virus. The main character will have to help the survivors, as well as contact the government to create a vaccine. The most spectacular part of the game was the system of dismembering enemies. It is pleasant to do it, and watching them fall apart is doubly pleasant. When hitting a zombie, first the clothes are torn and the skin is damaged, then the muscles are torn, then we get to the insides, and finally to the separation of body parts. All this looks very savory and bloody. However, the combat system is not very varied, and so it gets boring quite quickly in solo playthrough. But when playing the story campaign with friends, it won't come so soon, so I highly recommend finding a partner. Death Stranding. Someone saw in Death Stranding only a walking simulator, but I first of all appreciated the mysterious plot in which you plunge with your head and just go crazy from its denouement. But I also liked the gameplay in general. The fact that your buildings can help other players contributed to this. I spent a lot of time building a road and building a network of cables to quickly move cargo cargo on quests. I can't promise that everyone will love Death Stranding, but it's definitely worth giving the game a try. Maybe it will become the best project you've played in recent years. Demon's Souls. Now, this is my favorite Souls flick, and may Bloodborne fans forgive me. There are dragons here, and that's already a huge plus, and the locations are not very confusing, as it is usually done nowadays in such games. But what impressed me the most were the bosses. They are all beautiful, with cool mechanics, and each of them is memorable. And in general, despite the suffering in the process of passing, the game simply crashes into my memory as something beautiful. Desperados III. One of my favorite games of my childhood was Commandos. My father and I spent dozens of hours in it, trying to complete missions. Modern gamers can plunge into the genre of tactical strategy with Desperados. The essence of the game is that you have several characters under your control with different unique abilities, which you need to use and combine to quietly, or sometimes loudly, destroy enemies on the location to get to the main goal. Restarting the mission again and again, making adjustments to your almost perfect plan, and finally achieving the desired success is just an unreal pleasure. Detroit Become Human. And this is probably my favorite interactive cinematic from Quantic Dreams. The most impressive was Fahrenheit, because that's where it all started, but Detroit just made me weep. I've never seen such a human game where the main characters are androids. Everything about it is beautiful, from the branching plot and the influence of decisions on its development and finale to the characters and graphics. This is a masterpiece among games of this genre. Quantic Dreams reached the ceiling, and they will have to jump out of their pants to surprise their fans again. Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. For me, the cyberpunk setting in games opened not in Cyberpunk 2077, but just in Deus Ex series. And this game is absolutely different from the Pole's creation. RPG elements work much better in it, stealth is important, and the plot raises much more topics related to the problems of cybernetization of mankind. It's a pity, of course, that there is no third part in the subscription, as Mankind Divided is a continuation of the consequences of the grand finale. But even without it, it's definitely worth playing. Dishonored Definitive Edition, Dishonored 2, Dishonored Death of the Outsider. All you need to know about Dishonored is that the whole game can be completed without killing. And not only ordinary opponents, but even bosses can be framed in various clever ways, so that you don't have to dirty your hands yourself. But as for the main gameplay, the game is very cool and must be familiarized. The Division. Ubisoft is one of the few big companies that made cooperative games, and sometimes they made something really interesting and unusual. The Division offers you to become an agent who goes to New York, covered with epidemic, to find out what happened there and to put some order in the city where gangster groups started to rule. Here, you won't find much gameplay variety, and at some point you will realize that everything is just another demolition of health bars of the same enemies. But for some reason, the game doesn't get boring. Maybe it is influenced by the wonderful atmosphere of winter New York, or maybe by tactical possibilities and wagering for different classes. But the fact remains that the first Division turned out to be an interesting project. The second part is also okay, but I found it a bit stuffy. Doom. Doom was and will be the standard of a meaty first-person shooter. To some extent, Shadow Warrior 3 came close to it, but there is a Japanese theme involved, which will not be to everyone's taste. But extermination of hordes of demons is even in its own way a worthy cause. But if you forget about them, you won't lose much, because all the main things are collected along the way. Dying Light. 2. Stay Human. The events of the second part take place 15 years after the zombie apocalypse. Mankind has rolled back almost to the Middle Ages, and the resources necessary for life are becoming less and less because of what people are ready to tear each other's throats out. The protagonist, Aiden, goes in search of his sister in the city, cut off from the outside world. But upon arrival, he is drawn into the local gang's squabbles. The developers made parkour in the game more convenient and fights a little more dynamic. But personally, I still like the first part better. The Elder Scrolls. There is nothing to tell about Skyrim. It is the best first-person fantasy RPG, as evidenced by its sales and release everywhere you can think of. If by some miracle you still haven't had a chance to play it, then hurry up and hit the download button and go on a journey through the aged but still interesting world of Skyrim. The Erica. There is such genre as FMV. It's something like an interactive movie that we are used to, but unlike the same Dark Pictures series. Here, you see a movie shot on a video camera where real actors play. And the gameplay is that you have to choose among the proposed options of how to develop further events. Erica is not a bad project in this genre with an intriguing plot and unexpected turns. I recommend you to try this game because first of all, you will understand on your own experience what this genre is, and secondly, the game is quite quite short, which is also a plus, because it can be quickly replayed, and you will definitely want to replay it, if you like it, to look at other branches of plot development. Elite Dangerous. This is a space simulator that offers to explore the Milky Way with over 400 billion solar systems, each inhabited by planets, satellites, and asteroids. All space objects in the game have real chemical composition and move as they do in reality. The player can travel among the stars and planets, discover and explore new worlds, complete faction quests, and cooperate or fight with other players. The Evil Within 2. The Evil Within is developed by the same game designer who created Resident Evil series. But unlike Resident Evil, there is no place for zombies here, and the level of horror that takes place in the game is much higher and more disgusting. From the first moments, you are penetrated by the thick atmosphere and feel the tension from the danger coming from literally all sides. Fallout. For me, the Fallout series is the epitome of what a post-apocalyptic game world should be, and when the game went from 2D to 3D, exploring that world became even more interesting. I probably remember Bethesda's presentation at E3 in 2015 when they showed the trailer of the fourth part of Fallout, and the excitement and amazement of the character climbing into the power armor and flying in it on a jetpack is just a blast. Perhaps Fallout is the only game where the empty open world looks justified considering the fact that the events take place after a nuclear war. Far Cry. My favorite part of the Far Cry series is Blood Dragon. Sometimes I even thought it was the third installment. It wasn't until I was discussing its plot and gameplay with a friend of mine that it turned out we had played different parts. Blood Dragon caught on, the retro futurism shown in it, and the references to old sci-fi movies. In the catalog now, there is the original third part and the fourth, but it is Blood Dragon that I recommend you to try, because due to its setting and visuals, it is quite different from the beaten formula. F.I.S.T. Forged in Shadow Torch. This is an action-adventure game set in a dieselpunk world. The Legion of Machines has taken over the City of Torches, and the player, controlling the rabbit Rayton, must come out of hiding to fight many evil machines, solve more than one mystery, and save his best friend. The entire world is complex and interconnected, and much of the gameplay is based on exploring it. All locations are radically different from each other, but are part of one big map. To eliminate enemies will be available 3 types of weapons: whip, fist, and drill. Combining them will open up a lot of opportunities to quickly and brutally, or slowly and with grace, to deal with the enemy. Frostpunk. It turned out that the city-building simulator can be full of events, and to survive in the harsh winter, you will have to make your children work, feed your townspeople sawdust, and bust your ass trying to please everyone and not let the city freeze. Ghost of Tsushima, Japan, Samurai. That alone can already sell a game. But what impressed me the most was not the quality of the game, as Sony studios know how to do, not the graphics, from which sometimes you are in awe, but how cool the combat is realized here. Let's leave stealth to the assassins our way. It's open fights, one-on-one or one against 1,000. Doesn't matter. Every fight had me mesmerized, from the moment of drawing the sword from the sheath to the last swing and the enemy falling dead. God of War. The third part of God of War is definitely worth a try for those who like slashers and epic scenes in games. There are tons of them here, and at the same time, you can compare the combat system with the one that was made in the Scandinavian adventures of Crysis. I like both of them. The old one for the speed of battles and the minimal amount of running around doing nothing, and the new one for variation and variety. I felt it especially strongly in the Valhalla DLC. Gris. The plot of the game revolves around a young girl who suffers a tragic loss and immerses herself in her own world to cope with her illness. The gameplay in the game is relaxing and meditative with no trials or battles. You just calmly travel through a beautiful magical world with pleasant music, solve simple puzzles, empathize with Gris, and experience emotional recovery together with her. Guardians of the Galaxy. This is the game that few people expected, that was poorly advertised, but that has become one of the most interesting projects of 2021. I'm not a Guardians of the Galaxy fan, but learning the backstories of the characters in the game and how their relationships with each other are built was somehow very interesting. And the great soundtrack and humor complemented it perfectly. I'm sure that if Square Enix won't forget about the project because of low sales at the start, which they themselves are guilty of, will improve gameplay and won't lose the charisma of the original, then the second part may well become the main game of the year. Hogwarts Legacy. The game is set in the late 19th century and tells about the students of Hogwarts School. The player is allowed to set the appearance of his character, choose the faculty in Hogwarts, attend classes in the School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, as well as explore the open world, consisting of locations known from the movies, such as Forbidden Forest, Hogsmeade Village, Slant Lane, and of course Hogwarts Castle. And as the game progresses, the locations will visually change depending on the season. Thanks to the lessons, the character will learn how to create various magic spells, brew potions, tame magic magical creatures, and master other combat abilities. Congratulations to those who waited for this game to be released on PS Plus. It's a great project to try out on a subscription. Hollow Knight. Did you know that suffering is not only possible in these souls of yours, but even in these games with very cute graphics? Hollow Knight bribes you to try it with its simple but stylish visuals, and then makes you suffer from the first encounter with some unassuming bug to the very last boss. However, because of the user-friendly and responsive controls, you don't feel cheated, and clearly know that it's worth it to do some tray, learn the enemy's moves, be attentive, and you'll succeed. I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to the sequel called Silksong. Hotline Miami. This is a pretty hardcore and bloody top-down shooter. The problem is that the hero dies from a single blow or bullet, and you have to go through the room from the beginning. That's why you have to plan in advance the sequence of kills and act carefully, at least at first. Then, when you get good at it, you can burst into the room and kill all the living in a couple of tens of seconds. Immortals Fenyx Rising. Some people consider this game to be an analog of Zelda on PlayStation, and in general they are right, because the visual style as well as some gameplay features are quite reminiscent of the Nintendo Switch exclusive. However, this is not a dumb clone, but still an independent, full-fledged project, which is warmly received by critics and players. And the humorous manner and unusual representation of Greek gods only adds to its charm and makes it stand out from the rest of the games. Infamous First Light. This infamous Second Son spin-off is about a guide with neon superpowers, Abigail Fetch Walker. While in custody, she recounts the events that led to her arrest. Like Second Son, First Light offers players an open world with various optional activities and a large selection of unique abilities of the main character that can be unlocked and pumped up as the game progresses. Jurassic World Evolution 2. The second part of Jurassic Park Simulator develops the ideas of the original. Combined with expanded construction and customization options, this game will be even more large-scale and realistic. The story campaign will immerse us in the story, the events of which unfold after the events of the movie Jurassic World 2. The player will have to lead an operation to capture, preserve, and breed dinosaurs, including flying and marine reptiles, which were added after numerous requests from players. Also in Jurassic World Evolution 2, there is a mode Chaos Theory, where the player takes part in key episodes of the movies, and will be able to see how events would develop if the heroes face new difficulties and unexpected consequences. The Last Guardian. You play as a boy who, along with a huge vulture-like creature called Trico, is trying to escape from a mysterious fortress. The gameplay combines puzzles, platforming, and interaction with Trico, whose behavior is realistic and emotional. Critics highly praised the game for the unique connection between the characters, but scolded it for its clunky controls. The Last of Us. Without a doubt, The Last of Us can be called one of the best games developed by PlayStation Studios. It is amazing with the elaboration of the world and heroes, interesting plot, memorable mutants, and unusual for that time gameplay. And recently, a rebuild of the game for PS5 was added to the catalog, where the graphics were significantly pumped up, lighting and shadows were improved, and character models were redesigned to resemble the models from the second part. The LEGO games. The catalog has a huge number of LEGO games, on the addition of which, by the way, very much swore gamers. Nevertheless, at least one of them is worth trying. The main thing is to choose according to the universe that is very much to your liking. This can Star Wars, The Hobbit, Marvel Avengers, Jurassic World, and many others, like a Dragon Gaiden the Man who erased his name. The new installment of the Yakuza spin-off series reveals the events between the 6th and 7th installments of the franchise. The plot of the game tells the story of Kazuma Kiryu, who faked his death and adopted the alias Joryu to protect his loved ones from danger. One of the key features of this action game will be the ability to use different high-tech devices. During battles, players will be able to freely switch between Yakuza and agent fighting styles. The Yakuza style instills terror into the hearts of enemies, allowing Kiryu to use aggressive techniques with unparalleled power. The agent style, on the other hand, allows him to deliver quick and precise strikes with a wide arsenal of high-tech gadgets, such as stunning and knocking out enemies with an electric lasso. Lost Records. Bloom and Rage. The story adventure from the authors of Life is Strange will be released in 2 episodes. The events of the first one take place in 1995, with a group of 4 girlfriends who witness some mysterious events. After that, the girls agree to never speak to each other again in order to bury their shared terrible secret. However, 27 years later, later, fate brings them together, and the past catches up with them again. In April, the second part, Magicka 2. This is an extremely fun cooperative game about battle mages. Its trick is that you can logically combine the elements. For example, water and cold will create ice, and fire and water will create steam. You can also combine the same element, which simply strengthens it. For example, creating a sea of fire. With the help of different combinations of elements, you can create a healing beam, a protective wall of rocks, place mines, or even create towers that attack enemies. I don't have to say that all of this is a lot of fun. Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales. Clearly, the original game is better than Miles Morales in almost everything, but since he's been kicked out of the catalog, this is the only one left to play. Morales is actually pretty good too. The main storyline is interesting. Some of the new abilities are fun too. It's just that when it was sold for full price, it seemed like some kind of divorce because of the duration. But if you play with a subscription, 6 to 10 hours of fun the game can definitely give you. Nioh. When I first played Nioh, the first thing I noticed was the punch animations. Such beauty and smoothness I have never seen anywhere else. You are literally mesmerized by the way the main character moves, attacks, and moves from stand to stand. But the most pleasant thing here is that, unlike classic Souls games, weapons here have not two strikes, but a lot of techniques that the player has the right to choose, pump, and apply depending on the situation. I.e., you don't have to defeat all bosses with a light or strong blow of your starting sword. You constantly progress because of what you don't get bored until the end of the game. And even if you get bored, you take another weapon and the interest immediately appears again because it works completely differently and has completely different techniques, which also need to be pumped. Orcs Must Die 3. This is a third-person action game in which players need to defend a rift in space from waves of orcs. Weapons, various abilities, and traps are available to accomplish this task. It is the traps that make the game so unusual. Depending on the type, they can be placed on the walls, floor, or ceiling. And when the enemy passes by, the trap will trigger and attack him or slow him down or throw him away. The player must think about defense tactics and which traps he will use beforehand because resources and slots to build them are limited. In addition to the standard story mode, the game includes an endless mode, a weekly challenge mode, and war scenarios, where the player must defend against a huge orc army that can hold up to 1,000 soldiers. This mode uses special large traps called war machines to defend the castle and the rift. Outlast 2. Most players like the first part of this horror game better, but I like the second part better. I was really scared in it, and the first strong scare from the screamer on the streamer I got in it. Yes, the plot is not very clear, but the atmosphere is on a very high level. Only you need to take into account that this is a horror runner with an emphasis on hide and seek, and you can't fight with enemies here. Overcooked, all you can eat. This compilation includes the first and second part of Overcooked with all additional content and improved graphics. Kitchen Simulator. Overcooked allows you to feed delicious dishes to the most exquisite customers in a variety of places alone and in the company of friends online or in local co-op. Cook, for example, will have to be on a pirate ship in a dark, haunted house among drifting ice flows and even in space. When playing in a company, it is not uncommon for the tension to grow and start small quarrels and squabbles. But this only makes it more fun to play. Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. The game turned out to be a very interesting project for fans of party RPGs. The events unfold on the territory of the dead state of Sarkaris, which fell victim to the opened portal to the abyss, from where the demons poured into the world of mortals, destroying everything in its path. The game gives a huge choice. When creating a character, there are available for a minute 25 main classes. Plus, in the process, you can pump several classes simultaneously and combine their abilities. And there are subclasses and elite classes, which affect not only the appearance of the hero, but even on the development of the plot. In addition, there is also a global map, where you need to move troops and fight demons in turn-based battles. Prey. Before the release of Prey, never before games about aliens were so interesting. Usually it is a shooter with green or gray men, but here it's an intelligent dark substance with various psi abilities, from imitating objects, so-called mimicry, to mind control of living organisms or machinery, as well as pyrokinesis and teleportation. At first, you feel like a cornered victim who can be killed even by an ordinary garbage can. But the longer you play, the more you realize that you are the master of this space station, and they are just uninvited passengers. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. The game is presented in the form of 2D platformer Metroidvania, where new abilities will allow you to explore new corners of the location and the sectors. Play as an elite warrior named Saragon, whose main task is to save the young Prince Hassan. To fight enemies and bosses, he has access to various fighting techniques, which can be unlocked and used in different combinations as you progress through the game. As in the previous parts of the game, in The Lost Crown, you will have to not only fight, but also solve various puzzles and quests in order to progress in the storyline. Healing potions, by the way, can be refilled only at checkpoints, just like in Dark Souls, and boss battles are quite difficult, so you'll have to work hard. Rage 2. Yes, this game didn't get high ratings and quickly disappeared from gamers' radars, but in my opinion, it happened undeservedly. Let's take away from this project another empty open world and plot for a tick, and as a result, we'll get a very dynamic and brutal shooter, which, by the way, was created by guys who had a hand in Doom. In general, the open world was probably added to make Rage 2 look less like Doom. In my opinion, it was a bad decision, but not a critical one, because blowing up enemies' heads and scattering them with your super nanonitrite abilities is a real pleasure. Rainbow Six Extraction. This is the second game that I've been bitching about on streamers, and all because, first of all, it's very comfortable to play on gamepad, which is rare for shooters. Secondly, due to its randomizer, it seemed to me quite diverse. And thirdly, it's very cool to play in co-op, especially on high difficulty levels. And this is probably the main reason to play Extraction. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. This PS5 exclusive showed how beautiful the picture can be in games with cartoon graphics. It is also interesting to play due to unusual weapons, which can, for example, turn any enemy into a pixel version of yourself or make you dance. And this applies even to bosses. Each new gun arouses childish interest, and you want to try it on someone as soon as possible. The only thing I didn't like was the lack of enemy variety in the last 20% of the game. I got the impression that the developers were pushed to release the game in time for the PS5 release, because in the beginning and in the middle of the game, there is no such problem. Remnant 2. Excessive hardcore discourages most players, but there is a relatively small handful of players who prefer to agonize and then get high from those tortured victories. The Remnant series is just one of those games, and I highly recommend not playing it alone, but finding at least one reliable partner, because there are few places where you can see such hell, and it is much more pleasant to share these sufferings together. Return to Monkey Island. This is a point-and-click quest with crazy puzzles from the 90s and specific humor from the same place. The events of the game begin on Carnage Island, where the protagonist decides to gather a team, equip a ship, and solve the mystery of Monkey Island. The game will definitely appeal to the old guys who missed such quests, and young gamers may be interested in trying a new game genre, Returnal. And here to this beauty, I was very skeptical, but when I played, I realized why it is so praised by some publications. The plot here is mysterious, and a couple of times makes you really surprised. The gameplay is very dynamic, but not so much that you can twist your fingers. When you watch trailers, it may seem that it's stupidly impossible to dodge the abundance of balls on the screen, but it's not so. When you are in the flow, you can feel them all, and the heroine has special abilities not to die. The only thing that I don't like in it is that after death, you have to go through the game almost from the beginning, as in bagels, because the runs here are too long for this genre. If there were a little more flexible system of saving, it would be better, but even in this form, it is very cool. Road 96. This adventure game tells the story of a teenager who is trying to escape from the authoritarian state of Petria. Along the way, he meets characters whom he gets to know better and better over time, and his actions, sometimes seemingly insignificant, influence the development of the story. The game features interesting dialogues and a variety of situations with many mini-games. Incidentally, Road 96 uses procedural world generation, so each road adventure is unique and different from the previous one. Sackboy: A Big Adventure. This is perhaps one of the weakest games on this list, but I couldn't leave it out. The adventure turned out to be quite fun, especially in co-op, but it still falls short of the original parts, and in some places, it turns into a wild challenge that even grown men with years of gaming experience can't handle on the first try, let alone kids. Shadow of the Colossus. You play as a wanderer named Wander, who travels to Forbidden Lands to revive a girl by killing 16 giant colossi. Each of them is a kind of puzzle in which you need to find vulnerable spots and strike them with a sword or bow. The minimalist plot, the stunning atmosphere of an empty world, and the emotional music create the feeling of an epic but lonely journey. Shadow Warrior 2. If in Tsushima you had to swing a katana from a third-person perspective, here you do it from a first-person perspective. And if you get tired of it, you can grab a shotgun or machine gun and blast the damn demons that have invaded our world, tearing them to pieces. And it doesn't get boring. And considering that the game takes only about 10 hours to complete, it's simply brilliant compared to overly long modern games. Sniper Elite. You play as a sniper who liberates Italy or France from fascism during World War II. The game impresses with its satisfying long-range sniper shots, which are shown in slow motion and effectively demonstrate how a bullet pierces the head, tears apart the internal organs or the scrotum of enemy soldiers. Sonic Frontiers. The story begins when Sonic and his friends are sucked into a wormhole and scattered across a mysterious island. The Hedgehog retains his abilities from previous games. He can still run fast, jump over rails, collect rings, and attack enemies. All this takes place in an open world and on special levels that look like classic levels from previous parts of the game. The game also features giant bosses, which are quite interesting and varied by Sonic standards. South Park. Toilet humor in all its glory. I recommend playing it first and foremost to those who love the animated series, because the game essentially contains several episodes that you can also play. The gameplay is nothing special, but the whole flavor is in the plot. Star Wars Jedi Survivor. The events of the sequel unfold 5 years after the original game. The main character, Cal Kestis, is still being pursued by the Empire, and together with his group, he continues to explore the galaxy and hone his skills to challenge the dark side. The combat and role-playing components of the game will be significantly expanded. Cal will acquire new weapons, abilities, and combat stances, each with its own skill tree. One of the most welcome small innovations is that stormtroopers can finally be dismembered, as their monolithic nature in the previous game was simply perplexing. Stalker Legends of the Zone Trilogy. The set includes the game Shadow of Chernobyl and 2 standalone add-ons, Clear Sky and Call of Pripyat. The games tell the story of the anomalous zone that formed around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, filled with terrifying mutants and incredible artifacts, as well as the stalkers who try to obtain them and unravel the mysteries of the zone. Siberia, The World Before. The events of the new installment of this adventure puzzle game will take place in 2 timelines, and from the perspective of 2 characters. One timeline is set on the eve of World War II, where you play as a young pianist named Dana Rose. The other is in 2004 in a salt mine, where the main character of the previous parts, Kate Walker, is held captive. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. This is one of my favorite childhood franchises, and I spent a huge amount of time playing it. Playing Shredder's Revenge gave me an indescribable thrill that I haven't experienced in a very long time. The developers had a great respect for games from 8 to 16-bit consoles and created a product that was simply impossible not to gobble up. Pixelated but nice graphics, the very models of the Turtles. The opportunity to play for Splinter, Casey, and even April O'Neil, Bebop, Rocksteady, Krang, Shredder, and other favorite villains are here. All this brings a satisfied smile and awakens inside that small fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that with rapt attention watched cartoons about them on TV and played games on the console. Tetris Effect. Tetris is impossible not to love, and such Tetris, where you can fight 3 in co-op against artificial intelligence or the 4th player as a boss, even more so. Due to the ability to attack your opponent, the game has reached a new level and became even more interesting. Tomb Raider. The relaunch of the series about the adventures of Lara Croft turned out to be quite successful. I like the first part most of all, where she hasn't lost her humanity and naivety yet and only becomes a Tomb Raider. In the second part, she for some reason changed her face, but it was still interesting to play. But the third part, I passed through the Force because of the boring tombs and endless running through large levels. Trine 4, The Nightmare Prince. There are 3 main characters in the game. Knight Pontius, who can fight in melee and push objects. Thief Zoya, who has acrobatic tricks and can hit enemies from afar with a bow, and Wizard Amadeus, who can't fight but is able to create and move objects with magic. Gameplay is based on the interaction of heroes and complementing each other's abilities to solve puzzles. The main innovation of the 4th part was a completely updated combat system. The puzzles themselves became more diverse, and also the interaction between the characters was improved. Uncharted. My heart is forever with Lara Croft, but the 4th installment of Uncharted and the spin-off The Lost Legacy are also quite good. Nathan Drake's story got a logical ending, and we had a wonderful adventure in search of the mythical pirate colony of Libertalia and Henry Avery's treasure. And the girls, Nadine Ross and Chloe Fraser, are a pleasure to play as, especially for the latter. Until Dawn, 8 friends have D to a secluded mountain cabin cabin, where two of their companions disappeared exactly 1 year ago, but there was a maniac waiting for them. The player's goal is to keep them all alive, if he can. I, for example, failed, even though I tried. Until Dawn was the first interactive movie of Supermassive Games Studio, and it turned out to be very good, and I even think that so far they haven't managed to outdo themselves. Valiant Hearts. The Great War. In my memory, this is the most touching game, which shows that war cannot be romanticized. That behind every eliminated target and destroyed object, there are lives of real people with relatives who love and wait for them. Despite its cartoon style, the game managed to convey the horror of the First World War and the inhuman ways of mass murder that were used then. Watch Dogs. As I remember now, I had to wait for Ubisoft to fix its servers after the release of the first part of the game. It was very frustrating because it was the first game in my life which I bought immediately after the release, but despite the blurred first impressions and disappointment from the multiplayer component, in general, I liked the project very much. Hacking the city infrastructure and cameras was very interesting, as well as performing stealth missions, because it was also tied to hacking, only the ending was disappointing. The second part became more fun and youthful, and despite the fact that in general it turned out to be more diverse, I like it less. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. The Witcher is already an oldie, but is still one of the best open-world third-person action RPG out there. It's a pity, of course, that the subscription game is without DLC, but still, and without them, the main story campaign is very good. Exploring the world in it was really interesting for me because of the elaborate side story quests and the creatures Geralt encountered. Of course, the combat system has gotten tired after 9 years and is no longer able to captivate a skilled young gamer, but you can't call it crooked or lame either. UFC 5. The main feature of UFC 5 is the Real Impact system. It recreates the strategic methods of fighting. For example, missed punches and kicks will affect the mobility, stamina, and defense of the fighter, which of course adds more realism and more tactics to the fight. Wolfenstein, another good shooter from Arbor. This time we play for William Blazkowicz, who crushes fascists in an alternative universe where Nazi Germany won the Second World War and imposes his views on the world about how the future should look like. World War Z. This is another cooperative zombie shooter, but in this game there are actually a lot of them. The story campaign is a separate missions, where you need to survive in different corners of the planet. You have to fight with zombie hordes, not only with handheld firearms, but also use various traps, barriers, and turrets, which adds some variety to the gameplay. WRC Generations. In this part of WRC Rally races, there are cars with hybrid engines, which added new mechanics to the game. For example, in such cars, you will have to adjust the battery operation, changing the engine settings on special stages. For those who like to compete, there is a new league mode where you can compete against players who are close to you in level. XCOM 2. Turn-based tactical strategy games are not loved by everyone, or rather not only loved by everyone, but by very few people who can do it. However, who likes it or hasn't tried it at all, do it. The only thing that most complain about is that with a 95% chance of hitting and shooting point blank at the enemy, it turns out you can still miss. Otherwise, the game is good. Zombie Army 4 Dead War. Zombie Nazis turn out to be a lot of fun to kill in co-op. If you are looking for some gameplay simple game to play with your friends, Zombie Army 4 is just what you need. I hope this video was useful for you and you found some interesting games. And to stay up to date with new games that are added to your PS Plus subscription every month, as well as those that leave it, please like or dislike this video, leave a comment under it, subscribe to the channel, press the bell, and turn on all notifications so that you don't miss my new videos. Play and win. See ya!